In our last video on the history of the Sith, we described how the Exile and her allies took down the Sith Triumvirate, putting an end to the known Sith threat in the galaxy. Meanwhile, our redeemed Revan had disappeared into unknown space, chasing a threat he had only begun to remember. Unfortunately for the Republic, this wasn't the last they would see of the Sith. The Exile had bought it a few centuries, but the Republic wasn't able to use them to prepare itself for what was to come. For the Sith, the true Sith, had been waiting in the shadows, growing ever stronger until one day they leapt out and waged one of the most devastating wars the Republic had yet seen.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
When we last saw Revan, he had vanished, traveling into unknown space in pursuit of a shadowy threat he had begun remembering. The danger, it turns out, was the true Sith. Let's go back a few thousand years to the end of the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY. The Sith Empire, led by Naga Sadow, lost that war. In its aftermath, the original Sith Empire fell apart and Naga Sadow self-exiled on Yavin 4. But that wasn't the end of the Sith. One group of Sith, led by Darth Vitiate, held together and retreated to the unknown regions where they wandered in search of a new homeworld. 20 years after the end of the war, they stumbled across the forgotten world of Dromund Kaas, which they settled and began the long process of rebuilding their empire. These were the true Sith, direct successors of the original Sith Empire the Dark Jedi had established on Korriban so many millennia ago, and for a time, they lay low. Darth Vitiate, who had led the Sith to their new homeworld, proclaimed himself the new Dark Lord of the Sith and the Emperor of his budding Sith Empire. With the support of the Dark Council, a council of Sith Lords he founded to serve as the Empire's administrative body, Vitiate began the slow process of rebuilding the Empire's military. For over 1,000 years, they slowly grew their forces, expanding to other worlds in the system and gathering strength. And that's when Revan came across them, the first time. You see, Revan and Malak may have been falling to the dark side during the Mandalorian Wars, but the final push came from outside. They had once encountered the true Sith. Vitiate tortured them himself until they both fell to the dark side, at which point they were sent back to the Republic as the precursors to the Sith Empire's return. The new Darths, however, managed to break free of his conditioning and sought to make their own Sith Empire. After the battle at Malachor 5, a redeemed Revan began remembering the Sith he had encountered in the unknown regions and set out to investigate the lingering memory. At which point, he was captured once more. For 3 years, Revan was imprisoned on Dromund Kaas. His stint in prison was cut short, however, by an unlikely pair of allies, his former lieutenant and exile Mitra Surik and Lord Scourge, a Sith pureblood that had served Vitiate for years. Scourge had had a vision of a person who would stand up to Vitiate and put a stop to his evil plans for the galaxy, which we'll get to later. Sith or no, Scourge didn't want his Emperor to succeed. Believing Revan to be the one who would take down the Emperor, he allied with Surik and freed him. Together, the three began plotting their assault on Vitiate in a cave on Dromund Kaas. Before they could put their plan in action, however, Scourge realized that Revan wasn't really the chosen one he'd seen in his vision. In order to ensure he would still be around to help the chosen one when the time came, he betrayed Revan and Surik. The Sith captured them once more, and that was the last of Revan anyone saw for a very long time. For 300 years, the Sith Empire continued to operate in the shadows, gathering its strength. But then, in a flash of strength the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia, the Sith re-emerged and took their war to the Republic. Unlike the Sith who had come before him, Vitiate didn't plan on charging in, guns a-blazing. One of the benefits of immortality was patience, and Vitiate knew that if he wanted to win the war he planned on waging, he had to be smarter about it than his predecessors had been. So, for 1,000 years, he concentrated solely on building his forces. In that time, the Sith fleet grew to enormous numbers and his military expanded significantly. As early as 4000 BBY, Vitiate was already preparing the way for his eventual invasion. In 3954 BBY, he sent Darth Revan and Darth Malak as vanguards for his return. When that plan failed, instead of rushing in on the tail end of the Jedi Civil War when the Republic was vulnerable, he bided his time. Over the next 300 years, Imperial citizens began infiltrating the Republic. Vitiate secretly installed puppet governments in the Outer Rim and brokered covert agreements with other Republic agents. By the time he was ready to strike, the Belkaden, Ruler, and Cernpadel systems of the Dallin Bland sector were under his payroll. He made sure that he had moles within the Republic power structure that, once war broke out, would ally with his Sith Empire and fracture the Republic from within. Among those allies were the Chiss Ascendancy, which provided the Empire with crucial intelligence. Meanwhile, the Imperial Navy was feverishly preparing for the oncoming invasion. Drills were carried out daily, and soldiers were conscripted and trained specifically for the war. Those 3 centuries weren't easy on the Republic either. The Mandalorian Wars and the Jedi Civil War had weakened the Republic significantly. After the Exile defeated the Sith Triumvirate on Malachor V, the Republic only got a moment's respite before the Kanza Disorders. That was a 300-year war that took place in the Kan sector between 3970 and 3670 BBY that certainly put a strain on an already exhausted Republic. So, when the Sith Empire finally made their move, they positioned their fleets in key locations just outside Republic space. And then, they attacked. In 3681 BBY, the reconstituted Sith Empire, as it came to be known, emerged from the unknown regions and waged war. The conflict that broke out would last for almost 30 years until 3653 BBY and was known as the Great Galactic War. Out of seemingly nowhere, a massive Sith fleet tore into the Outer Rim territories and began taking world after world. One of the first worlds the Sith targeted was their ancestral home of Korriban, which the Jedi had guarded for centuries. Jedi Master Cal Darach and his Padawan Satil Shan had been stationed on the world with a small garrison of Republic troopers when Sith Lord Vindikin and his apprentice Malgus attacked. The 30 Imperial warships they brought with them rapidly overwhelmed the defenders, and just like that, the Sith had their holy world back. At the same time, Imperial warships appeared in the Tingel and Aparos sectors. Vindikin waited for the light diplomatic vessels the Republic sent out to resolve the conflict to arrive. He wanted them to send back intel on the size of his fleet before he destroyed them, thus beginning a psychological war on the people of the Republic. When the Republic sent a sizable military fleet to respond to the attack, Vitiate and the systems he had bought snared them in a trap and destroyed them utterly. After their victory, the Sith lost no time in destroying the starship manufacturing facilities in the Sluis sector, where many Republic starfighters were built, then took Sluis itself. Any civilians or governments that refused to swear fealty to the Emperor were executed, spreading fear. The Galactic Senate, meanwhile, was too busy arguing about the nature of the threat to take real action. The Jedi, however, were quicker to recognize the threat of the Sith, for once, and took the lead in the war against the Sith invaders. Their heroic deeds inspired the Republic to stand with them, launching counterattacks in the Manos cluster and the Seswena sector. Over the coming years, the Republic would lose the Battle of Korriban and the Battle of Balmorra. The Empire took Ilum, Dathomir, and Manaan, the loss of which was a devastating blow to any war effort. By the time the Sith took Agamar and Utapau, they controlled almost half of the Outer Rim. At this point, we're 10 years into this war, and the Sith have been continuously expanding. Once they were done in the Outer Rim, the Sith drove inwards, hoping to take Bothaway in the Mid-Rim. The Republic, however, had managed to pull itself together enough to force a stalemate of sorts. On Bothaway, the Republic took the initial victory. Unwilling to let it go, the Imperials sent a vast force, fighting viciously. Their huge losses, 10 Imperials dead for every 1 Republic trooper, didn't discourage them. Although the Sith did eventually win, it was at a huge cost. Another force that was decimating Republic fleets were the Dreadmasters, 6 Sith united by a force bond that used their battle meditation and powers of fear to psychologically cripple entire fleets. Thanks to a strike team led by a Jedi Knight, the Republic was able to capture the Dreadmasters and seal them away in the prison worlds of Belsavis, where they were imprisoned for the next few decades. Their loss was a huge blow to the Sith Empire, but it didn't turn the tide fully in the favor of the Republic. So far, the war, albeit bloody, had been confined to the outer and mid-rim. That soon changed when Malgus, now a new Darth, attacked Alderaan in the core. Malgus lured the Republic fleet, protecting Alderaan away before striking. The invasion was brutal, but it was met with a local force of troopers and Jedi who had happened to make a stop on the planet. This small force took Malgus's army on, fighting mainly in the mountainous and forest regions to impede the Imperial advance. Shan and Havoc Squad fought Malgus and his forces head-on, with Shan managing to seriously injure the Sith. The Battle of Alderaan ended in a Republic victory, which provided its citizens with some much-needed morale. Spurred on from their successful defense of the core, the Republic retook some worlds in the Mid-Rim and even reclaimed some territory in the Minos cluster. Recognizing the need for a new ally, the Sith Empire meddled in the Mandalorians' affairs and installed a puppet Mandalore. The United Mandalorian clans allied with the Empire and, at their behest, blockaded the Hydian Way, which was the Republic's most critical trade route. It lasted long enough that riots broke out on Coruscant and Republic forces stationed farther out were forced to retreat. Eventually, the blockade was broken, but it undeniably damaged both Republic morale and their war effort. When the Republic managed to both break the Mandalorian blockade and defeat the Sith at Order Adama, they managed to recover enough to press into Imperial-occupied space. Republic forces attacked Korriban, then laid siege to Ziost, close to the heart of the Empire. In the end, however, the Sith Navy overwhelmed them and pushed forwards. They took Sereno and Order Adama in a new offensive, then tried to take Renvar. The Republic managed to defend that final world, but it was perhaps the last victory they saw in the war. Almost 30 years into the war, the Imperials were breathing down the core's neck, butchering and executing any opposition in their way. They seemed to have the upper hand, which is why the galaxy was shocked when they offered the Republic a chance to negotiate for peace. Understandably suspicious, the Jedi recommended the Senate ignore the offer. Both they and the Senate recognized, however, they couldn't win this war. At the very least, negotiations might buy them some time to rest. Thus, Grandmaster Zim was delegated to lead a contingent of Jedi and senators to the negotiations on Alderaan, where they would discuss the terms of the peace treaty. It turns out they were right to be cautious. While the diplomats politicked on Alderaan, a massive Sith fleet appeared in the sky above Coruscant itself and bombarded it mercilessly. In the sacking of Coruscant, as it came to be known, the planet was invaded, occupied, and broken. The Jedi Temple was bombed, and Sith stormed the ruins to slaughter the Jedi within. When the temple was completely destroyed and the planetary defenses disarmed, the Sith took the entire planet hostage. The Sith even slew the Supreme Chancellor and took his office as their command center. With their capital world under Sith control, the peace delegation on Alderaan had no choice but to accept the Empire's terms. The Treaty of Coruscant, as it came to be known, was essentially a Republic defeat. The Republic and Jedi had to stand down and withdraw into Republic space. The Sith Empire was recognized as the legitimate ruler of half the galaxy, and the Republic ceded even more worlds to the Sith. The Republic had lost. Of course, the end of the war didn't mean the end of hostilities. After the Republic's defeat, the two galactic powers settled into an uneasy Cold War, unaware of the dangers that still awaited them in unknown space. But that's a tale for another time. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode of the series.